Hi everyone, I'm Laura. So as Natalie mentioned, I'm actually the Director of Studies for the French office of VICI. And I really want to press on something that Natalie mentioned earlier, which was about fluency coming from immersion and interaction with the language. That is so true. I'm going to give you the example of myself. Natalie mentioned I grew up in a bilingual household. I absolutely did. My mum's English, my dad's Belgian. They spoke in French to one another, but for some reason they always spoke to me and my sister in English, which meant that I always could understand a bit of French. I definitely had an advantage compared to other kids who were in my class at school, for example, but I never, as a child, really was able to speak French very fluently. When we would spend time abroad in Belgium, I could kind of get my point across, but I really was at this plateau, like really stagnated. I could not get further beyond the kind of broken French or getting myself understood. Couldn't get further than I wanted to. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s where, I'd spent time studying French at school. And in my early 20s, I started to spend more time in France, in the country. I started to spend regularly spending time in the country surrounded by the language. But not just that, I also started to really regularly immerse myself with the language from the comfort of my own home as well. Meaning I started to engage with DVDs in French because Netflix wasn't what it was now. So I started to engage with DVDs in French. I started to read French magazines. Every time I would go to the country, I would buy myself a stack of magazines that I would then bring back with me, and I would immerse myself in them. I started to have French friends that I would speak to in the language as well. And then suddenly in my early 20s, once I started to really engage with the language and interact with the language in that way and be immersed in the language in that way, I suddenly had this huge jump in what I was able to say. And then after a few years of this, suddenly when I would go to France and when I would be speaking in French, people would assume that I was a native speaker and they would assume that I had always spoken that way. Whereas actually it wasn't at all the case. It was me having to deliberately immerse myself in the language through stays in the country, through as I said, through media and things like that. It was thanks to that thanks to that immersion, that I really managed to start speaking the language fluently, almost like a native speaker. And I suddenly also in my 20s started to realize, when I started to speak this way, I suddenly realized that I was able to use structures that I didn't know that I knew. Or I would hear myself say something and I would be surprised. For example, I would hear myself come out with the subjunctive and I would be surprised because I would think, oh, I didn't realize I knew that. Or, oh, I remember learning about that at school and finding it really complicated and not really understanding it. And now I just said it without even meaning to. So that is the immersion factor. It really is that. It's suddenly absorbing the language as much as you can, and it's that really helps you to build fluency in the language. And this is something that I've done for other languages as well. Throughout my life, I've also studied Spanish, I've also studied Dutch, and I've had the opportunity to spend, through work, to spend time in those countries as well, having regular trips to both countries. And again, it's through the immersion in those languages that I have been able to go from understanding the rules of Spanish and understanding how you have to conjugate and understanding that you have to apply this and you have to apply this. Spending time in Spain is what allowed me to go from understanding those rules and being able to explain to you what you have to do to being able to actually use those rules in real life situations, in communicative situations. And again, it isn't just about spending time in the country as well, although obviously that is one of the best things that we can do if you can spend some time in the country every now and then. It's also about immersing yourself through media, through things that are of interest to you as well. And it's really through that time that I started to realize that everything fell into place. When I was spending more time in each country, more time immersed in the language, that it suddenly all started to fall into place. And now with my job, one of the best things I really love about my job is that I'm now able to help other people do that as well. So through the French office, I actually kind of do the opposite of what you're doing. I get to help French people who want to come on an immersion program to our UK offices. I get to help them really make the most out of their immersion programs as well by understanding what it is they want to learn, why they want to learn, what they need to know, and then helping them to make the most of their immersion programs in the UK. And I love to see people gain in fluency, in particular, fluency and confidence, after even just as little as 1 week in the UK on one of our immersion programs. They come back to France and they feel so much more confident. They have so much more fluency in terms of speaking, but also in terms of listening as well, actually being able to understand native speaker speed language. So really today I just wanted to, press on what Natalie said about the importance of immersion, interaction with the language, and how that really is what's going to help you to achieve fluency, not just being able to explain how to use the language, but actually being able to use it yourselves. Thanks so much for listening, and of course I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.